Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline podcast. We record on Monday, November 1st, as the Hokies just got a huge bounce-back victory down in Atlanta against Georgia Tech. They are now back to 500 on the season. On episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast, we'll talk about the game, go through the Hokies offense looking good for the second week in a row, including Trey Turner's huge performance, especially in the first half, and look at where the Hokies go from here with a short week coming up against Boston College. All of that and much more coming up on episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you into episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast. However you are taking it in, live or archived, if you are listening on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, we welcome you in. If you are on YouTube, we ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you are live in the YouTube, drop a question or comment for Will and David, and we'll get to those with Nick at the end of the show. As always, the Tech Sideline podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. You can help bring Olympic hopeful athletes to one of the best and fastest growing wrestling programs in the country. Go to southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. We have a different crew on set again. It seems like we're rotating guys every single week now. No Chris Coleman today. He was down in Atlanta for two Braves games in the World Series. Got to see two wins this weekend. They didn't finish it off last night, but he is not on set today. We've still got Will Stewart across the way, founder and general manager. To my left, managing editor of Tech Sideline, David Cunningham, filling some big shoes today in Chris Coleman's chair.
I'm in his chair. I've got a lot of stuff to fill.
Yeah, a lot of analysis going to be coming from David today. We're thinking it's the first time Chris hasn't been on the podcast in almost 2 years since a wrestling preview when Tony Roby was on. So going to be interesting without Chris today. In the fourth chair, it's going to be Nick Brown, as always, on Mondays. He will have his segment in the middle with some good stats, maybe some trivia, and we've got some YouTube questions at the end. As always, behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, and I'm your host, Jake Lyman. This is episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Before we get into football, how was your weekend, guys?
It was good. Well, I was with you. We went to Martinsville yesterday for the NASCAR race. It was Jake's first race.
It was.
You said you enjoyed it, right?
I did. It was fun. I got to try some of the legendary Martinsville hot dogs. I thought they lived up to the hype for $2 especially.
Yeah,
it was good.
Nice. I did not have one, but it was fun. We had a really good time. There were 9 of us that went in our friend group. We had a really fun time. So Denny Hamlin, unfortunately, my driver, and I think who Jake picked up, or I
may have put $5 on Denny Hamlin. So and Alex Bowman was not my favorite person.
Yeah,
yesterday.
Denny Hamlin got spun out by Alex Bowman with 7 laps to go yesterday.
I think I saw that. Didn't he come over and just like nudge him in the tail? Or
yeah, he hit his left rear and sent Denny into the wall, and then after the race, Bowman was trying to do a burnout and Denny ran his car into him. They were just they were doing this. It was a really entertaining race, but it was a good time.
Yeah, there were 2 cars that got spun out in the last 30 laps. Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin. Those may or may not have been the 2 cars that I bet on. So,
who went to cover the Georgia Tech game for 3304 Sports?
That was Giovanni Heater, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago, and then Tyler Katz and Carter Hill. So we sent 3 down there.
Now, did any of them go to Martinsville on Sunday?
They did not.
Okay.
I think I would have been down in Atlanta if I wasn't going to Martinsville the next day. But
and I covered the game from my couch. So
yes. So David, you don't have to be Chris. You just got to be you go to all the press conferences.
Yeah.
So that's the perspective I'm expecting you to bring.
Yeah.
I actually didn't get a chance to watch any of the post game press conferences.
Yeah.
I
it was
read,
pretty good.
I can't remember who I was reading, but they said that Fuente got emotional in his comments. His opening comments.
Yeah, I mean, he got pretty emotional. I think a lot of it was just, I'm so proud of this team. And one of the things I related it to, that first thing that came to mind was Manny Diaz's comments last week when Miami finally got over the hump and beat NC State. He was really emotional talking to the ESPN reporter after the game. I'm so proud of these guys because they work so hard and they put so much blood, sweat, tears into it, and that was kind of the vibes Fuente was giving off. But it wasn't crazy emotional, but you could tell
he didn't break down in tears.
No, but you could tell. I mean, the first thing he said was, "I'm so proud. I'm really proud of this group." And to be fair, he should be. I mean, they fought really, really hard, and they were, so close for 3 games in a row. And I don't want to say finally got over the hump, but finally righted the ship a little bit.
Well, things went their way.
Yeah.
I mean, 23-17. Georgia Tech it's early fourth quarter, about 11 minutes to go. Georgia Tech is at the Virginia Tech 12-yard line with a 4th and 2, and the Hokies stop them. And I looked it up. Tech had given up 9 of the last 10 fourth downs, and they get that stop. We're all having that deja vu feeling, and then they get that stop. And then Virginia Tech controlled the ball out of the last 11 minutes of the game.
They had a 7-minute drive
Tech
right after
controlled
that.
it for 10 minutes.
Well, and they also get the ball back up 26-17, 9 points with about 4 minutes left. That was almost the exact same scenario as Syracuse the week before, where Tech wasn't able to hold on. I think it's a big moment for this team that with games like Notre Dame and Syracuse, where you give those leads up late, they finally were able to hold on.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the fact that teams this year on 4th downs against Virginia Tech, 13 for 16. That's all teams. The Power 5 statistic is even worse. But the fact that when the defense needed a stop on 4th down, they came up and got it. I mean, that is so impressive considering that, again, their backs are against the wall, and they made the play they had to make. And I liked your analysis of it in your story this morning, because it was Dax Hollifield and Norrell Pollard, two captains, 2 leadership council guys that came up and made the big play.
Guys just making plays. So to clarify, at that moment, opponents were 13 of 16 on 4th down. Georgia Tech didn't get that one, and then, of course, at the end of the game.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was looking at the live stats, and it's a weird situation where the stats are not archived yet on Hokie Sports.
No, and I believe that's a problem. Georgia Tech had a problem with their stats.
Yeah, they've got ongoing issues. And if you look in the live stats, I was looking at the drive chart, and it said that Georgia Tech lost the ball on downs, the one we were just talking about, and then in the game they lost it on downs. They didn't lose it on downs; they threw an interception. But in the live stats, it says that they lost it on downs. So it says Georgia Tech was 1 of 3 on 4th down, and I don't think that's accurate. I think they were 1 of 2.
So that still doesn't count as it still would count towards the 4th down stats, even if you threw a pick on it, correct?
Correct. My mistake. Yes, you're right.
So it still should be 1 of 3, but it wasn't a turnover on downs, I guess would be the way to.
Yeah.
Well, Armani Chapman gets the big pick, and when I looked through that last 3 drive sequence, I think the big thing was defense finally stood up when you're up by 9. You get a stop. Don't let them go right down the field and score a touchdown. And then the offense gets the ball back. And against Notre Dame and Syracuse, the issue was they went 3 and out and punted it right back.
Right.
Offense got the first downs they needed to be able to run out the clock after that, which was huge.
7-minute drive. And one of the plays that was brought up today in the press conference, because we got to talk to Justin Fuente and players today because it's a short week. I believe it was David Teal asked Parker Clements. I had asked a couple questions about running the ball, and David Teal asked a question about that there was one play, I think it was 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, and they handed off to Malachi Thomas, and he just punches it, and he gets about 3-4 yards. Got the first down. Tech doesn't get it. Tech stalls. But because they were able to, get that short gain in that situation, you continue to drive. You go on a 7-minute drive, and it ends in a field goal.
Yes, it ended in a field goal.
That was Romo's 4th field goal of the day, which another impressive performance. But I mean, the fact that Tech was able to sustain a drive at the very end of the game, it's not something they were able to do all season so far.
Yeah, so there's 11 minutes left to go. It's 23-17, and then you eat up 7 minutes, and you make it a 2-score game, and Georgia Tech feels the pressure coming out, and they chuck the interception.
Well, this was a huge win for Virginia Tech. It feels like they got the season back on track at least a little bit. You lose that one, you're 3-5, 1-3 in the ACC, and you've got to go 3-1 down the stretch to become bowl eligible. Now it seems like a much more manageable path to get those 2 wins necessary to get to 6.
Yeah, when you're playing, now you go on the road to a Boston College team, which I'm sure, as Chris will point out this week, Boston College can't really score the ball. They have not scored well over the past 3 weeks at least. And then you've got a poor Duke team at home. The Miami and Virginia games are going to be tough, but as I was just talking with Chris in there, Brennan Armstrong's hurt. Right. Like, Brennan Armstrong might be out for the season. So,
and Virginia just gave up 66 points to BYU.
So there is potential.
And 700 and some yards. I think it was over 700 yards.
Well, the score at halftime of that game was 42-38.
That was
at
an
halftime.
Insanely entertaining game.
But there are plenty of opportunities to get wins down the stretch.
Yeah, so I looked it up, and Boston College lost Phil Dracovic a month ago or whatever to a hand injury. I don't know if they've specified what it is. But in their last 4 games, they've lost all. They start out 4-0. They've lost 4 in a row. They've only scored 40 points in those 4 games. And the last 3 games, they've been held under 300 yards. So, this is looking ahead, and we'll get to this on Wednesday. But the only thing that really makes me skittish about that game is it's a road game coming off a road game on a short week in a place where Tech historically doesn't play very well.
Yeah.
Friday night on the road against Boston College, the Hokies' next test. Something that has to make fans feel a little more optimistic. The offense looked good for the second straight week. You wrote in your Monday Thoughts article today about the offense, 491 yards.
Yeah.
That's the 3rd most for the Hokies' offense since 2018. So a really good performance coming off another good one against Syracuse, maybe trending in the right direction there.
Yeah, they just looked better doing it. They looked tough on the line of scrimmage, I thought, offensively. Receivers running wide open. Burmeister's passes were not super accurate. He underthrew a couple of guys that fortunately were like I said, super wide open. 6.1 yards per play, so that's a couple of weeks in a row where they're over 400 yards, and it looks like they've turned the corner. Am I saying they're a dominant offense? No. But they're finding some stuff that works, and they are looking like either the equivalent or greater than the sum of their parts, and that's what you want out of your football team, is you want them to look like they're playing up to or beyond what they're typically capable of, and we just haven't felt that way so far this year.
Yeah, and I think this was the best. You can disagree, but I think this was the best all-around performance across the board, offense, defense, special teams this season for Virginia Tech. I mean, first 6 games, defense played well enough to win. The offense was kind of nowhere to be found, or hit or miss at times. Syracuse game, defense was really bad. The offense was good. And then this week, it was finally like Virginia Tech was putting everything together. And I think when you have the running game playing well, Burmeister had his best game of the season. So I think Virginia Tech starting to put the pieces together. I mean, it is in game 8. So that's maybe a little later than you would have liked, but the fact that you can run the ball and then you can throw play action passes, and to your point, Burmeister's passes weren't necessarily really accurate. I mean, he had the one 69-yard touchdown pass to Trey Turner that was like a yard or 2 behind him, and luckily Trey Turner had like 10 yards of open space. But
and how about Trey looking physical? We've talked about how he is not a physical player, but he looked physical. He broke not just tackles on that play, but later on.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about without James Mitchell, the Hokies offense needed a playmaker, and Trey Turner looked like one on Saturday. Even the one he didn't get in the back of the end zone, he went way up for that ball and
he did about as well as you can do.
I mean, it looked like he was the true number 1 wide receiver that the Hokies have been waiting for when James Mitchell left. You really didn't have that guy. I mean, that 69-yard touchdown, it was an underthrown ball, but a great route, and then he made a few guys miss to get into the end zone.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it goes back to the running game, because when you can establish the run, Malachi Thomas had over 100 yards for the second straight week. He's the first true freshman to go back-to-back for over 100 since 2001, and Raheem Blackshear had 80-something yards himself. So when you can run the ball effectively and efficiently, that forces defenses to bring more guys into the box, less guys on the back end, and then when you can finally get, not every single pass was very accurate, but when you can finally spray the ball out wide, get it to a playmaker like Trey Turner, and he can make a couple guys miss, go for a 69-yard touchdown run, it opens up so many more things, and I think Tech was just balanced this weekend, and that's not something we've seen all season.
So that's the first time a true freshman has gone over 100 yards rushing in 2 straight games.
Yeah, I believe that's what Virginia Tech football tweeted earlier today.
Hey, YouTube, you know who that is, right? 2001. So, Nick, let me know when the first person chimes in.
I got you.
I buglieve it's the person you were comparing him to, correct?
No.
Okay.
No, Suggs was a true freshman? I think Suggs was recruited in 1988, so he was a true freshman in fall of 88, redshirt in 99. So he was... 2001 was a season where Suggs hurt himself like in the first game of the year or something like that. And
speaking of Suggs, so Breece Hall, the running back for Iowa State, just reached 20 consecutive games with a rushing touchdown. So Fox Sports threw up a Twitter graphic and said the most consecutive games with a rushing touchdown in a game. And Lee Suggs, number 2 at 22 games.
Yeah.
Bill Burnett, who played at Arkansas in late 1960s, had 23. But, Lee Suggs only above Monty Ball and Derrick Henry.
Wow. He had something like 53 rushing touchdowns in his career or something like that. I mean, that toss sweep down at the goal line, forget about it.
And how about Trey Turner, ACC Wide Receiver of the Week honors?
Yes.
Yep. 7 catches, 187 yards, and a touchdown.
When you can finally... I mean, I'm going to preach this all week. When your offense is balanced and you can run the football, but you also have... I mean, it wasn't the best day for Burmeister, but it was the best day of the season for him. And when you finally have that weight lifted off your shoulders where you don't have to run the ball, you don't have to worry about throwing the ball every single play because you don't have a running game. When you finally have a running game, it opens up so many more things.
And Burmeister made some excellent plays on the scramble. Stuff that Fuente was telling us at the beginning of the year. He's really fast, and you got to see that.
Well, and things, especially in the first half, seemed schemed up very well.
Yeah.
That touchdown pass to Trey Turner, it was the pump fake on the screen. Trey Turner kind of chopped his feet like he was getting ready to block and then releases up the sideline, and there was nobody there.
Yeah.
The offense just seemed to be more efficient, and maybe that has something to do with, like we talked about last week, Justin Fuente spending more time with the first-team offense.
Yeah, so that does seem to be the theme for the last couple of weeks, and we'll just leave it at that for the time being.
Well, at the very least, the defense, it didn't look like Fuente leaving the scout team defense this week had as much of an effect. The defense looked better as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is the defense finally got pressure. We saw it a little bit last week, but, I mean, man, Garrett Schrader stood in there and took some hits last week. But the defense, Georgia Tech's more of a run-heavy offense, and Tech loaded the box. And unlike the Syracuse game where the Orange had 2 over 100-yard rushers, Georgia Tech did not. I believe he only had 1 in was it Sims or was it the running back?
Sims.
Gibbs.
It was Gibbs. Yeah,
Gibbs had a long run.
Yeah,
Sims was close
Gibbs
to
had
100.
Yeah. So I mean, but I think Virginia Tech was better defensively because unlike Syracuse, where the few times the corners were on islands, they kind of gave up plays late. The corners played really well. The safeties were pretty good. The linebackers, Alan Tisdale, man, he had his best PFF grade of his entire career
By
right?
a long shot.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like the pieces finally came together, and Tech got stops when it needed to, and it played off of the offense scoring points. And we've seen so many times earlier this season where the offense would score and then the defense would give up a touchdown right after that, or the defense would get a stop and the offense stalls immediately. And this time it was offense scores, defense gets a stop. Offense gets the ball back and eats time off the clock. And it just, it wasn't the prettiest game, but it worked and it got the job done.
Well, and last week we were talking about the final 5 games of this season. All of them, with the exception of maybe Duke, where you feel like Tech should have a pretty large advantage in that game, feel like toss-up games.
Right.
And if the Hokies are able to play the way they did on Saturday, with the offense doing enough, maybe need to get a little better in the red zone, and the defense playing the way they usually do, this could be a team that makes a run towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
Right, so the red zone was about the only thing they didn't do well on Saturday. They had 3 trips inside the 10 and came away with 1 touchdown. And then they had an additional trip inside the 20 and got a field goal. So that's only 1 out of 4 trips in the red zone that they got a touchdown. So do you want to drill down into the defense a little bit? Because if you really look at the numbers, the way I phrased this in my article today was that I felt like the numbers were better than actually watching the defense play.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is a couple things. Number one, Georgia Tech did average 6.1 yards a rush. They had, let me see their total yardage. Total yards was 366 yards, which I think is the only team that's held them to fewer is Clemson. And Clemson's got a great defense.
Yep.
Other than that, Georgia Tech's gotten more than 366 yards in every game this year. But the key was Virginia Tech controlled the football. They ran 78 plays, and Georgia Tech ran 56. That's the fewest plays Georgia Tech has run all year. I think actually that's the fewest plays a Virginia Tech opponent has run all year. They held WVU and I think Richmond to 59 plays. And I think I wrote in my article that Georgia Tech had 54 plays, but no, it's 56.
But that's still the lowest of the season.
Yes. Yep. Time of possession was only 24 minutes for Georgia Tech. So they did average 6.5 yards a play. What made it come out better statistically was they had a couple plays called back, but people argued with me, well, those plays wouldn't have gone that long if they didn't commit the penalties. Okay, that's a solid point, you know. But Georgia Tech was only 3 of 12 on third down, and that helps these statistics look better. And when you're running 78 plays and you've got the ball almost 36 minutes, and they're running 56 plays and they've got the ball 24 minutes, it gets back into that thing with the offense doing better. It helps out the defense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it goes to that third down because Virginia Tech has been pretty good defensively on third downs all this season.
18th,
but it was the fourth. What?
18th in the country.
Yeah,
18th in the country. What's the percentage?
33%. Last season, they were only 36.
Okay, so, but on fourth down, like we've talked about, Virginia Tech's poor on fourth down. But when you can finally get stops on fourth down and you can get off the field, it really helps. And my one other gripe with the offense, while we're still on the topic, would be they did not convert good field position. They had 2 drives, one that started in Georgia Tech territory and one that started on the 45, and they came in with 3 points. They missed. That was one of the missed field goals. But besides that, you get into the red zone. That's the only reason you didn't convert. But I mean, again, the defense, when the defense needed to come up and make plays, it did. And I think a lot of that has to do with the linebackers playing better. Against Syracuse, the linebackers, I think they had the 2 worst PFF grades on the entire defense, maybe. And the linebackers on Saturday against Georgia Tech were solid, and I think that was the missing piece.
Well, Tisdale led the team in tackles with 12, I want to say, and he had 2.5 tackles for loss, which was that was something we said against Syracuse on the podcast was the reason Tech's defense struggled. They just could not get that minus play for Syracuse's offense. I believe there was 3 tackles for loss against Syracuse. They doubled that with 6 against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, when you can get in the backfield, when you're not just getting pressure, but when you can physically get in the backfield, especially against a team that runs the ball so much, it helps you so much because instead of it being a 2nd and 6 or a 2nd and 8, it's a 2nd and 11, and even the -1. I mean, it doesn't seem like it would make that much of a difference, but it really does because then Georgia Tech's playing from behind the chains. And I think that was one of the things that Tech did not do well last week against Syracuse. They couldn't get in the backfield, and I guess that's a credit to Syracuse's offensive line because they really blocked well and held it up. And they did get a couple hits on Garrett Schrader, but Virginia Tech finally got into the backfield on Saturday and showed because, I mean, like you said, 6 tackles for loss? That is huge. It makes such an impact on the game.
Yeah, and that's a career high in TFLs for Tisdale, by the way. It is not a career high in tackles. He had 14 and a half. And I think I said that was all the way back at the very first game he ever played was against Boston College in 2019.
Which would make sense because that was his highest PFF grade of his career.
No, that was his highest PFF grade. You're right. The 14 and a half tackles came against Kentucky.
Oh, yes, you did say that in the Belt Bowl.
Forgive me, I was up late last night running a million numbers, and I get them a little mixed up.
Well, one of the nuggets that we had on Wednesday's show was that it was a homecoming for Jalen Griffin, 2 of his brothers playing for Georgia Tech. He came up with possibly the biggest play of the game.
He had a heck of a game. Strip sack. I mean, there's nothing more you can ask for that. We actually talked to him after the game, and I think he said he had maybe 60 people.
Wow.
60
Wow.
fans and
Friends and family.
friends and family. That's what.
Family.
And his two brothers play for Georgia Tech, so they were calling it the Griffin Bowl. But I mean, he came up with a huge play, and again, yes, he had a little bit of a bonehead play later. He got called for a personal foul. But
so clarify for me what happened, because all I saw was the picture that Ivan Morozov took of Fuente chewing out Griffin on the sideline.
I believe it was a late hit.
Was that on the fourth down on that drive?
I think it might have been on third down, and it was a late hit out of bounds. And the guy, I think he had just stepped out of bounds and gave him a little shove. Or no, it was a roughing the passer. That's what it was.
Yes,
it was.
It was on that last drive right before the Chapman pick.
Yeah, it was a very silly play. I mean, the quarterback Sims rolls out and throws it, and 2-3 seconds after the play, Griffin just shoves him to the ground. But Fuente actually brought that up today, because coming into the game, Tech was the least penalized team in the country, and we got a couple questions in there to Fuente and to some of the players about it today, and he actually brought up the Jalen Griffin thing, and he said, one of the things you have to do, especially when it comes to penalties, is you can't dwell on it. You can't say, you can't let it get in your head and go, okay, well, I just cost my team 15 yards. And he said, he brought Jalen Griffin over to the sideline, and, he wasn't mad at him. He's just like, look, it happened. I understand it happened. It's a bad play, but you're not going to do that again. Just don't do it again. Just go be better the next play. And I think that was after Jalen Griffin's strip sack. I
believe it was
after.
Yeah.
But I mean, still, Jalen Griffin went back out there and played better, and he had a heck of a game. That was a huge play. I don't remember. Did that lead to a Tech scoring?
Led to a field goal.
A field goal.
Yeah.
That was the one in the Georgia Tech territory, the one starting drive.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But I mean, still, that's an impressive play.
So to clarify, the picture I saw wasn't Fuente chewing Griffin out. It was Fuente being emphatic that he needed to get over his dumb penalty.
I mean, I'm sure he chewed him out a little bit. But Fuente's interpretation was, I got on him a little bit, but then I was like, look, next play.
So
next
it was
play.
both.
It was a bit of both. But like all coaches, all good coaches do, they make sure their players understand, that yes, what they did was wrong, but you're better than that. I think that's
so it's interesting when you tweet this stuff out about how Virginia Tech commits basically the fewest penalties in the country. They're very good at it. There are people that, of course, spin that into a negative. They're like, oh, there's so much emphasis on not committing penalties that the kids play tight and are afraid of making a mistake. And it's like,
Well, we've talked about it. We talked about it a lot early in the season about how the Hokies weren't penalized very often and they don't turn the ball over. That trend is continued throughout the entire season. But is it a positive? Which you would think on surface level it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But is it a negative that maybe they teach them not to be aggressive and that can lead to less turnovers and less penalties,
I don't
but
know
maybe
about
less
that.
big
I
plays?
don't know. I would say it's a positive. And I was going to read a quote from Fuente today. He
All
said,
right, go ahead.
He said, quote, I think young people at times have trouble moving on. That's what he said about the situation. He mentioned Jalen Griffin. And I think that's really important. And it's funny because we were asking him, I think people asked him about injuries and asked him about not turning the ball over and asked him about penalties. Then he was like, you guys are just going to jinx us for the rest of the season because we haven't, we've been fairly injury free for the most part and we haven't turned the ball over and we haven't really gotten penalized. And that's where all the questions today. But
interesting. So regarding penalties, I would have to go back and look at it, but I for some reason I did an exhaustive analysis shortly after Fuente was hired about how many penalties his teams at Memphis committed, and I think he at that point he'd been at Tech for a year or two, so I could do the comparison, and you could see that the penalties had declined at Virginia Tech. Memphis committed a fair amount of penalties under Fuente, but that hasn't really followed him to Virginia Tech. And any coach will tell you, and me as a person watching a game, it's the dead ball fouls and the false starts and the not getting lined up properly and things like that drive coaches crazy. It's the mental type penalties. When you accidentally face mask somebody in the heat of trying to make a play, or you, and I guess coaches are probably split on the late hits out of bounds and things like that.
like a pass interference penalty.
Yeah, Now, I think holding is somewhere in between. Because typically when an offensive player or a defensive player is holding a player for the other team, they know it. It's not an accident. They're doing it on
They're
purpose.
just trying to get away with it.
Right. So that's one that falls in between. But the mental pre-snap and post-snap penalties are very different than playing aggressively and accidentally making a mistake.
Well, I think now might be a good time to head over to Nick. We're going to touch on more from the Georgia Tech game and look ahead a little bit. But before we take our break, let's send it over to Nick Brown in our fourth chair.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on some Hokies in the NFL and the craziest stat, well, not really stat, but bet line on Khalil Herbert this week was 71.5 yards. He finished the game with 72.
Nice.
That'll
That
make
won people
a better clinch up real fast.
Wish I had bet on him this weekend.
Who was it that had the backdoor cover? Was it
Clemson.
Clemson
Yeah.
scored,
Man.
scored on the
play.
last
Brutal.
point of the game to win by 10, and the spread was 9.5, something
Yeah.
like
9
that.
or 9 is somewhere in there, yeah. Brutal bad beat for Florida State.
I think
bettors.
Jake and I both had Florida State covering, too.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, I don't like looking at my DraftKings account.
Joey Sly also was 4 or 5 field goals and 1.5 on extra points. They did beat the Bears and Khalil Herbert 33-22, but the Bears are just not very good at all. And also, I found out a really interesting stat. I was reading through the comments on one of the previous podcasts. Someone reported that no conference champion or college football playoff team in the last 6 years has had a revenue reported in the athletic department of less than $120 million. Will that change in the ACC this season?
Pittsburgh, right? No,
Wake Forest?
Or Wake Forest.
Oh, well, yeah.
Wake Forest now ranked in the top 10.
Did
number
you
10.
see this stat? Kelly Gramlich, who does ACC Network stuff, she covers Clemson too. She played basketball at Clemson, and she tweeted a stat earlier that Wake Forest, they're a private institution, and they only have they have just over 5,000 total students enrolled, and apparently there were like 4,000 of them at the game on Saturday.
Yeah,
They had like 80% of their student population at the game.
Yeah, that's
That
like
is
Virginia Tech having 25,000 students go to a game, which may have happened in the first week or two, when they were kind of letting them in. It may or may not have happened. So I had a couple of questions coming out of that. Number one, you guys that follow the NFL, I guess the rookies are locked into a 3-year contract with the team that they're with, right?
4-year.
4-year.
So it's 4-year contracts for every rookie, and then if you're a first-round pick, there's a 5th-year option tagged on at the end.
He was a 6th-round pick, pretty
Yes.
late. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's he making, $400,000 or $500,000 a year?
More than that, I would assume into 7 figures,
Okay.
maybe.
It'd probably be like 8 or 900.
8 or 900,000, I would assume.
Okay.
I would
not
say
bad.
it's up there. I believe, Nick, did Brian Johnson have a game-winning field goal this weekend too? I think he had a game-winner.
Yeah,
He had one
Saints.
on Monday.
Monday versus the Seahawks.
Oh, I know he had
My
that.
Seahawks,
I know he
yeah,
had he made at least one on.
No, they won 36-27.
Wasn't close.
But he
Never mind.
may have had, so the Saints were up 2, so I think he may have kicked the go-ahead,
Go-ahead,
and then Tom
okay.
Brady threw a pick 6 after that.
okay.
So
Yeah.
But impressive.
So how do you like Herbert's chances to be the starter next year? Or
Well, so David Montgomery is the Bears' usual starter, and he is hurt right now.
yeah.
right?
I saw, I don't know how credible this is. I was on Twitter, being a Titans fan today, not a great day. Derrick Henry out for 8 to 10 weeks. I was trying to see if we could get any good running backs to the team, and Bears fans were saying they might want to trade Montgomery because Herbert's been so good. So maybe possibly trade deadlines tomorrow. Could see a move that puts Herbert as the permanent number one.
That would be interesting. But I mean, I think I saw a stat heading into this upcoming weekend that Herbert was. There were only 2 running backs. I think one was Derrick Henry. I can't remember the other one. But Herbert was 3rd in the NFL in total yards over the last
Over 3 weeks
3
span.
weeks.
It was
Yes, I
Derrick
saw
Henry and Jonathan Taylor,
Yeah.
both of which either Heisman winners or Heisman finalists during their time in college.
Man, if Khalil Herbert had gone to Alabama or something like that, man.
Man.
And then also there's the Scott Glessner stat of the podcast. I like putting that out
a
there.
regular feature.
Since the 95 Cincinnati game, Virginia Tech is 191-8 when giving up 20 points or less. That's
Well,
pretty darn impressive.
I want to say there is a stat under Fuente that was mentioned by Tom Wormy on the broadcast that Virginia Tech has not lost when a Fuente team has given up less than 20 points.
Huh.
Somebody might have to research that. I don't remember. Or maybe it might have not been 100%, but it was a very favorable stat.
That's so interesting. I'm not going to correct you and make you say fewer. Fewer than 17 points?
Yeah. Or 20.
That's
20,
one of my
fewer
things.
than 20. Yeah.
I think we may need to make a graphic or something like the Scott Glessner stat of the day. Just throw that up on screen. That can be your next thing, along with the red shirt lights.
Well, Scott needs to get himself a sponsor, and then he can regular part of the podcast.
And then I wanted to name drop a little bit. I won't be here on the Boston College the podcast, but the starting kicker now for Boston College went to Radford High School as a freshman this year, 6 of 7. Connor Litton.
Right.
He's kicked 2 50-yarders this season, and just wanted to show some love to the New River Valley and
That's
go
awesome.
Radford Bobcats. So.
Yeah, he's a
Mike Young and Connor Litton, 2 Radford High School lights right there.
He's a pretty good kicker, and I think the story is Tech didn't offer him a scholarship, and Boston College did. So
He was ranked 5th in the country kicker as a kicker, and according to 247.
Yeah.
And Tech didn't offer.
So if he plays a role in beating Virginia Tech, don't get mad. He went where he was offered the money.
Hey, John Parker Romo had a pretty good weekend.
He
though.
did.
He did?
He
4
did
for 5. I think he's made 8 of it. You said 8 of
He
his
had
last
made 8 in
9?
a row before he missed the 53-yarder. Yeah, and you remember he only made 1 out of his first 3.
Yeah. So
And
he's
the
what,
2
9
that
for his
he
last
missed
10?
were short. Something like that.
But that's really impressive.
And he hadn't, until he missed the 53-yarder, he hadn't missed over 40 yards all year long. Now that's impressive.
Well, I believe it was the Notre Dame game. You made your pick and said that the game was going to come down to possible kicking a field goal, and John Parker Romo couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It feels like the narrative has shifted. Now he's been consistent.
Yeah, if I was a betting man right now, which I don't think I want to be anymore, if it was up to John Parker Romo to kick a game-winning field goal, I would feel very confident, which is exactly what I said the opposite heading into the Notre Dame game, because I think he had missed the 2 of them at West Virginia the previous 2 weeks before that or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
he was looking shaky, but that's over.
Yeah.
It's possible Virginia Tech becomes kicker university. We've got, Sly Johnson and now John Parker Romo.
Yeah.
It's
Somebody's going to pick up on that. If JPR goes to the pros and is kicking in the pros.
One of Evan Hughes' favorite stats, and I have not looked this up, and I guess I need to. I want to say he always brings it up every single time a Virginia Tech kicker does something well in the NFL. I think Justin Fuente might have the most kickers in the NFL out of any college coach, because
He's got a Memphis kicker.
Because he's got 1 or 2 Memphis guys in there too.
Yeah.
So he's got at least 3, maybe 4 kickers in the NFL.
a lot of running backs too for Justin Fuente.
Yeah.
So really, what you've got is James Shebist kickers in the NFL.
It's
right?
true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Just makes me think of all the Memphis running backs that are in the NFL too. You've got Darrell Henderson starting for the Rams, Kenneth Gainwell's with the Eagles, Antonio Gibson's with the Washington football team, Tony Pollard's with the Cowboys. That's 4 Memphis running backs.
You just knew that off the top of your
I
head?
don't know how he knew all that, but
I remember we talked about this on the podcast, and I know there was one we were missing. It was Tony Pollard with the Cowboys.
yeah.
So that's 4 starting caliber running backs who I want to say Fuente probably recruited all of them.
yeah, and
No
Herbert.
kidding.
So there we go. It's Justin Fuente, RBU, and KU. Not
KU.
Kansas. Khalil Herbert, Kansas. We're done. We're gonna take a break.
Stream of consciousness here.
We're just talking right now. We will come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about Malachi Thomas having another big game. We'll talk about the defense a little bit more and look ahead as the Hokies have 4 games remaining on their schedule trying to become bowl eligible. Stay with us here on episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We're going to take a break and be right back. We welcome you back on episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We are going through Virginia Tech's bounce-back win down in Atlanta on Saturday over Georgia Tech, getting them back to 500 on the season, as well as in the ACC. We've got our crew on set today: Will Stewart, David Cunningham, Nick Brown, Malcolm Stewart, and I'm Jake Lyman. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you drop a comment or a question in the chat, and we'll get to those with Nick at the end of the show. If you're watching on YouTube, we hope you enjoyed the the Sky Cam, and
During the break.
Will got to walk up to it. You got to watch us watch Will go up to it as well. So fun little break there. I hope people are enjoying the Sky Cam edition over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I need to start doing more jokes with that. To keep
And it has
people,
elevator music behind it, right?
right. Yeah, we do need to change up the music.
I don't know. I like it. I think it's a Tech Sideline podcast staple.
We should have Enter Sandman playing during it. But then again, copyright issues.
Yeah,
So,
correct. We'll get flagged.
Well, we did glaze over Malachi Thomas with back-to-back 100-yard games, and people in the comments were chiming in that he was the first true freshman to do that since Kevin Jones back in 2001. But he's been great for 2 weeks now. It seems like the Hokies have finally found that tandem with him and Blackshear that's going to get the most out of the backfield.
Yeah, and I think Chris has harped on it so much, and I'm glad he's not here because I know he'd harp on it more. But so early in the season, Virginia Tech had 4 running backs they were kind of giving the ball to, and now it's cut down to 2, and it's Blackshear and Thomas. And I just saw a stat. I looked it up during the break. Thomas, he's carried the ball 57 times this season, and he has -3 yards. He's only lost 3 total yards.
Yeah, see, I think that's an underappreciated stat. There's a year, I don't know it off the top of my head, but one of the years that Lee Suggs was in his prime, he barely lost any yardage all year long. And that's an underappreciated stat when a guy can gain 12, 13, 1,400 yards like he was doing and lose 15 yards in the process. That tells you he's decisive. First of all, he's got good blocking. Second of all, he's hitting the hole fast. He's physical. He's falling forward. He's not getting knocked backwards, that kind of stuff.
You did compare him to Lee Suggs.
Yeah.
Did. And he's running north to south, I think, would be the main thing there. He's not trying to get too fancy in the backfield. He's just getting yardage.
Not trying to be David Wilson against Clemson. And one of the interesting things is, and Fuente, I don't even think he was asked about it. I think he just brought it up during the press conference earlier today. He mentioned, why Thomas didn't play early in the season, and he said it's because it took him a couple weeks to settle in and to understand everything, and he specifically meant like pass protection stuff.
I think the phrasing he used was there's more to being a running back than just running the football.
Yeah, right. and a lot of that goes into pass protection. We asked Malachi Thomas about it, and he was like, it's not necessarily just pass protection, but it's understanding the scheme, understanding where I'm supposed to be. Because if you throw a true freshman running back out there and he just completely whiffs on a block, you've got a 250 to 300 pound guy running straight at your quarterback who you need to stay healthy. So, but the fact that he's finally, I think, got the pass blocking aspect of it right has really, really helped. And he graded out really well pass blocking this weekend.
Yeah.
Well,
so let's go over the stats. He had 25 carries for 103 yards, 0 lost yards. That's 4.1 a carry, and his longest carry was only 12 yards, and that was the one at the very end, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
So close.
Yeah, where he almost it was at the Georgia Tech 35-yard line, and he tripped, or he would have had another 25 yards and a touchdown. And Blackshear had 14 carries for 83 yards. Again, no lost yards, so very nice, and that's 5.9 yards a carry. So it's it's one game, but it looks like it's made both guys better.
Yeah.
You mentioned the pass blocking grade from Malachi Thomas. That surprises me. He must have had a lot of better plays than the one I'm going to bring up, but there was one play where he turned to block somebody and they were already past him and were hitting Braxton Burmeister. I forget what it was, probably an 8-yard sack early in the third quarter, but he did not know where that defender was coming from.
Yeah. Well, those games, those grades at this point are preliminary, and I'm just now starting to look at them and then look at them again later when they're finalized. They typically don't change a lot, but we'll see.
I'm looking up. I know Chris put it in his article right now. I'll bring it up in a sec.
All right.
Well, there were 2 freshman running backs making plays in that game. Malachi Thomas for the Hokies. I want to bring up Jahmyr Gibbs. He averaged 10 yards per carry. A lot of that did come on that big long run. He had 61 yards. One thing I noticed, though, the defense did play a lot better, but they struggled to bring him down. It seemed like he was bouncing off the tackles a lot.
So looking at the preliminary PFF grades, the Virginia Tech was solid across the board, except the tackling they were given a grade of a 40 on the tackling. Mm-hmm. And that gets back into what I talked earlier about watching the game, and the Virginia Tech defense's statistics were good, but it didn't feel that good. And part of that was the tackling. The tackling was pretty poor, and so I put in my article today. If you think that Virginia Tech's tackling has been terrible, that's not exactly accurate. They've been in the 60s and 70s for every game this year, except Pitt. It was a 50 in tackling. And again, think of this in terms of pass-fail grades in academics. Anything above a 60, you passed, you did okay, and the higher you get, the more impressive it is. Anything below a 60, you failed. So they had a 50 as a team. They had a grade of 50 against Pittsburgh. And in this game, the preliminary grade is a 40 point something. So other than that, the team graded out pretty well across the board.
Yeah. And I just showed Jake while you were talking. Malachi Thomas, 79.0 pass blocking grade on 9 pass blocking plays. So
on 9 plays, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good for a true freshman running back.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point about the defense, I thought the linebackers, especially Tisdale, they came to play. I think that was a little bit, I think, of the issue against Syracuse, is kind of like they were out of position a little bit. And, when you're playing a running quarterback and Sean Tucker, you're in trouble when you're out of position and not in the right spot. But yeah, I thought, they've tackled pretty well for most of the season so far. I don't think the numbers do it justice.
Yeah. And part of it is that the guys that they've had struggle tackling the football at times have wound up. Well, just let me give you an example. I think, and sorry, I don't have it pulled up, but I think that the safeties didn't tackle well in this game. Yes. And when both safeties aren't tackling well, that's a problem because they're the two guys in the middle. And if they get past the linebackers, you're in big trouble. So it's this thing that can look worse than it is. So Tisdale, I think we touched on him earlier. His PFF grades had been pretty bad the last 2 or 3 games in the 50s and then that sort of thing. And the preliminary grade is an 85, wow. So where did this come from? Yeah. And so not only did he lead the team in tackles, but his preliminary PFF grade is good, and the coaching staff gave him the Defensive Player of the Week. Yeah. So some of it is statistical, some of it is subjective, and some of it is objective.
But pretty good week all around. And I think one of the other things defensively, I mentioned it earlier, Virginia Tech got pressure. Yeah. When you can get pressure, and like we said earlier, when you can get in the backfield, it completely changes the game.
Yeah, and Sims, there were a number of third downs where Sims was under pressure, and he's just not good in that situation. He can run, but he can't complete a pass.
When we talked about Jordan Williams in the middle of that defense and Amari Barno, both kind of being a little invisible towards the beginning to middle part of the season. Yeah. They both looked good on Saturday. Barno had a sack, and I think Williams showed up with at least one tackle for loss, if not a couple of them.
Yeah, I think Jordan Williams only had 3 total tackles, but I think one of them was a tackle for loss. But when you have your better defensive linemen, and this is not me saying the other guys aren't good, because when Tywan Garbett plays well, that really helps too. But when your big names players, I guess, Jordan Williams, Amari Barno, when they can get in the backfield and create havoc, it really helps you a lot.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I did want to bring up, I wrote this down specifically. We kind of talked about the 4th down issue, but it kind of flipped, and you can see the result. The Hokies were able to pull out a close win instead of losing in a close one. They held Georgia Tech 1 for 3 on 4th down after entering the game 12 of 15, I believe was the
overall,
stat.
Yeah.
And then the Hokies struggled on 4th down. I want to say they were 2 for 8, 2 for 10. And
I believe you tweeted that.
Did they pick one up last week? And no, you were 2 for 8 coming in.
You're 2 for 8 coming in.
When they were 1 for 1.
1 for 1, and that was the touchdown to Tavion Robinson. Right. So if that trend can flip back and maybe the law of averages kind of works out for the Hokies, maybe can kind of see it going the other way.
So that particular play, I've been critical of that sort of play where it was down near the goal line, and it's what I've called a soft play. It's not up the middle, but it's a good call. I think Burmeister turns left and fakes the handoff and then kind of bootlegs around, and you wind up with Burmeister, who's very athletic, isolated against a linebacker. I think it may have been Avey, who's also athletic. Yep. But then you've got Tavion Robinson running around in the end zone, and there's not much the defense can do against that. When the defense is not parked on a play like that, it's extremely effective. It's just West Virginia, for example, encountered something similar, was parked on it. So I'm not sure why Georgia Tech wasn't more prepared for that.
Well, a big win for the Hokies against Georgia Tech on Saturday. Now it kind of sets up, they've got an opportunity to make some plays. And I wanted to bring this up. Pitt lost on Saturday, so we kind of had ruled out the opportunity for anybody except for Pitt competing for the Coastal. Now the window is back cracked open a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Nick can pull up the ACC standings right now.
Yeah, I'm going to pull them up here.
Okay, I know Virginia Tech. Tech is 2-2 now,
2-2.
And I know Pitt only has one loss, so obviously you're one loss behind. But man, watching that game afterwards, like keeping up with it, this is why I don't bet anymore, because I had Pitt to cover. But I mean, the fact that the Coastal Division's wide open now, I mean, that's crazy. And again, Wake Forest in the Atlantic Division looked really, really, really good again on Saturday.
It looks like Wake's going to run away with the Atlantic at this point.
Yeah, so Pitt has they're at Duke. They'll win that. They host UNC. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they host UVA.
Oh, and then their
Another
final
big
game,
one.
they travel up to the Carrier
They travel
Dome.
to Syracuse.
And something
I
about
know,
the
that's-
vacuum.
It's not Halloween, but it's spooky.
Well, don't sleep on that. Syracuse has the number one defense in the ACC.
And they've got
In
The
terms
dome.
of yards per game, they're
Yeah.
number 2 in terms of scoring defense. So the 437 yards that Virginia Tech had against Syracuse is the most Syracuse has given up all year. They're a good defense.
And Sean Tucker just had 200-plus yards again on Saturday against Boston College. So
Why isn't he in the Heisman consideration?
I don't even know.
Well,
Because
because
he
that's
plays
not
for
how it works.
Syracuse.
Yeah.
So the current ACC Coastal standings, I'll read it off. Pitt is 3-1. Virginia is 4-2. North Carolina is 3-3. Miami and Virginia Tech are each 2-2. Georgia Tech is 2-4, and the Duke's 0-4. So there's, I mean, I don't think, Virginia Tech would have to probably win out to win the Coastal,
Yes.
because Miami and Virginia are ahead of them. But they did already beat North Carolina,
Right.
and Pitt still has to play Virginia and North Carolina, and they lost to Miami.
Well, the key there is Pitt would have to lose at least 2 of those
of them,
last
yeah.
games.
2 of those last 3.
Remember that UNC Wake game is not an ACC game.
Yeah, that is important. They play this weekend, and it's an out-of-conference game.
So let's look at Miami's schedule. Really good 2 weeks. They beat a ranked NC State team and a ranked Pittsburgh team. They host Georgia Tech this coming weekend. Yep, this coming weekend. Anything can happen. You know how Miami is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And although I don't have the entire Miami Georgia Tech history stored in my head, there's been more than one occasion where Georgia Tech has spoiled a party for Miami.
Yep.
Then they're at Florida State. Then Miami hosts Virginia Tech. If Pitt quasi tanks, the Coastal could come down to Miami,
And then they play
Virginia
Duke
Tech.
last game of the season.
And then
right?
they play Duke last game of the
Yeah,
season.
what was interesting is I saw a quote, and I told Chris about this earlier in the office. Pat Narduzzi was like, I guess he was asked about Miami, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I think Miami's going to win out. I think they're going to win the Coast." Or he didn't say they were going to win the Coast, but he was like, "I think Miami's
they're
going to
gonna
win
win out.
their next 4
Certainly
games."
they can. Yeah.
Well, Pitt, again, that is the hinge there. If
Yeah.
Pitt gets back on track and wins 3 out of their last 4, then they're going
Then
to win
it's
the
over.
Coastal.
Yeah.
But if not, Virginia Tech still
No,
plays
no, wait a
Miami,
minute,
still
'cause-
plays UVA.
If Pitt wins 3 out of the last 4, then they'll have 2 losses, and if Miami wins out, they'll have 2 losses, and they'll get the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it'll also come down to Virginia, because Virginia's
Yeah.
sitting
Virginia
there with 2
also
losses,
plays
and
Pitt.
Virginia plays Pitt, and so it's coastal chaos.
It
which,
looked
which
like we were going to get a
love.
year off of Coastal Chaos
Yeah.
for a little bit there.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
so much. Miami throws it back into at least the realm of possibility if
Yeah.
Pitt were to fall a couple more times. Wake
Well-
Forest on the other side, not so much.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things is you think about it. I mean, if something happens, like the last 2 games of the season, the Miami game or the Virginia game, like if Virginia Tech wins the next 2 weeks, the Miami game and the Virginia game are huge.
Yeah.
Like you go on the road for both of those games. That's why it's so important to win this week against Boston College, and then at home against a pretty bad Duke team.
With an extra day to prepare as
Yeah,
well.
and when you go on the road to Miami, not that Miami will be in the driver's seat, but if Pitt is free falling, there's a potential, and then you go on the road to Virginia, And if the Cavaliers are without Brennan Armstrong, anything can happen.
Well, it's not out of the realm of possibility that going into that Miami game, Miami, Virginia, Pitt, and Virginia Tech all have 2 losses.
Right.
So,
which could chaos.
Well, it gets back to when we were talking about Pittsburgh. I'm sitting here looking at their schedule, and I said it'll be interesting to see what they do the rest of the year. Are they going to be a 10-win team?
Yeah.
They have a great quarterback, an experienced team. Or are they going to be the same old Pitt and drop a couple games here and there and keep the Coastal interesting?
It's going to be interesting. I thought we were going to – it seemed like before the Miami Pitt game this weekend that it was almost a foregone conclusion. Wake, Pitt in Charlotte now. But Wake also remained undefeated this week.
They destroyed Duke. They demolished – I mean but everybody should destroy Duke. But the fact that they put up like over 70 points against Army and they only had the ball for 14 minutes.
17 minutes.
17 minutes of the game. Just impressive.
I believe I went through the stats for that one. There were 21 total offensive drives, 18 of which ended in a touchdown, including a streak of 11 consecutive touchdown drives.
Goodness, man.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, definitely, I think last week I even wrote down on my outline for the podcast, Coastal is no longer in the conversation for Virginia Tech after losing to Syracuse. And somehow we still find ourselves with that glimmer of hope. Boston College, Duke, both winnable games, and then again, those Miami and Virginia on the road could be the hinge of the season.
Yeah,
interesting stuff.
And I think Miami's playing a lot better lately. Like Will said,
what's their quarterback's name?
Van Dyke, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tyler Van
Dyke, I believe. And we were you guys were talking about it last week. I believe that Van Dyke looked really poor in his first game or two, and then he's really bounced back and he's looked really good. And I mean, I can't help but think, like, Miami's got to feel really confident, especially knocking off a ranked NC State team and then knocking off a ranked Pitt team. And they've got not the toughest schedule the rest of the way. I mean, I think Virginia Tech is the most difficult team on their schedule, and they get them at home. So it's there's a lot that's going to go into the last few weeks of the ACC season, but I think a lot of how Virginia Tech's season shapes out, it depends on how the Hokies respond to, we've seen how Virginia Tech's responded to losses now. Virginia Tech lost last week. They go on the road. They get a win. How's Virginia Tech going to respond to a win? First win in multiple weeks. First road win of the season. You have to go on the road in a short week. How do you perform? Because if Virginia Tech can't beat Boston College, doesn't really matter what happens the rest of the season.
Well, and this is the first win that I guess you could say wasn't expected since North Carolina. I mean, you expect to beat Middle Tennessee. You expect to beat Richmond. This was maybe the first one where you don't go into it thinking, okay, we should beat this team by a few touchdowns.
Yeah, I think we all picked Virginia Tech, the two of us and Chris.
And it's good that you bring that up because I wanted to say that earlier. That was just based on a feeling that things couldn't keep going wrong for Virginia Tech, and sure enough, they did. Well, they didn't keep going wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I had a gut feeling. I know you put in your story that in your picks that you had a gut feel. I think Chris was just like Georgia Tech's not very good.
Yeah, he was more analytical.
But how do they respond? How do the Hokies respond now going on the road to a Boston College, a place that might have like 4,000 people in the stadium for the game?
One of the things I'll do this week is look at their attendance. I did see them. I don't remember who they were playing earlier this year, but I was surprised how many fans they had there because the
Missouri game was a packed house. That was a sellout game. And that was a wild overtime game. And then when they hosted NC State for that night game, the place was rocking until NC State.
Now, their place only holds, I think, 44,500 people or something like that. But still, they haven't even been filling that up in recent years.
And it's probably going to be pretty cold. I mean, I haven't looked at the weather, but Friday night in Chestnut Hill in November.
Yeah, Boston in November.
It doesn't feel like it's going to be balmy. So probably going to scare off some of the fans as well.
Yeah.
We should probably table this for Wednesday.
We probably should. We've got the preview podcast coming up on Wednesday. I want to check in with YouTube. Let's see, Nick, do we have any good questions in the chat today?
Well, now that you mentioned the hopes of winning the Coastal again, things get real interesting around Mr. Fuente. So just hypothetically, Virginia Tech wins out, Pitt loses 2 more, and there's that ACC title game. Even if he loses to Wake, again, that's all hypothetical. What happens to Mr. Fuente and the coaching staff if that happens?
This would be so Virginia Tech wins the Coastal Division.
Or just win out in
Virginia
general. 'Cause
Tech-
Pitt,
Or just go 7-5 or 8-4.
Yeah, just even if Pitt, wins 3 of the last 4, they go to the championship game, and then Tech.
I think it's
Wins
such a tough position
Yeah.
because, like you wrote in your story today, your Monday thoughts. At the end of the season, Whit Babcock has to make the decision whether he wants to extend or fire, because you don't want to have a coach with less than 3 years on a contract in terms of recruiting.
He has 3 years remaining on his contract, and we talked about this in a previous podcast. You are right. He either has to fire or extend it, and everybody wants to get rid of Cornelson and other parts of the offensive staff. But if you do that and you stick with Fuente, you have to extend him.
And you could get him to bring in a new offensive coordinator, but then you're extending him, and I think this goes back to some of the things I've talked with Chris about, and I think we talked about last week. Just there are systematic issues in the program. One is player development, and if you bring in a new offensive staff, how much does that change? Does that really change anything at all? I think a lot of it, to answer the question, Nick, I think a lot of it will depend on how the results are down the stretch, like how big the margins are. Because if you go and blow out a couple teams on the road and you show that you can score points in the offense has a complete 180, I'm not saying they will, but then the conversation is different. If Virginia Tech wins by 9 points for the next 4 games, I don't know if it's convincing enough to keep. You guys know where I'm going with that.
Well, just hypothetically in the situation Nick laid out, you win out, you beat Virginia on the road to clinch the Coastal Division. It gets a little bit hard to fire a coach after that, you would assume. But has the bridge kind of already been burnt? Fire Fuente chance in the crowd against Syracuse. It would
there's
be a
an
very
element of
tough
the fan
choice.
base that is not going to change its mind no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
And does it fix the issues of development, strength and conditioning, player retention? Retention is not another thing we're talking about. So, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't answer all those. What you don't know is you don't know where Fuente and what Babcock themselves are mentally. They may have already had a discussion where they're just like, coaches get tired of certain situations. The man stood in Lane Stadium and heard the Fire Fuente chants.
And not just him, but his family too.
Right. And sometimes things go sour like that, like your girlfriend, it just goes south.
Yeah.
And you can still have a few good dates, but you just know it's over.
Yeah.
And that may be where those guys are.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will come down to just how Fuente's feeling. Does Fuente want to stay in Blacksburg? Does Fuente, him and his family, is this a place they want to be? And whether or not, and their relationship with Whit Babcock and how Whit Babcock feels, because it could come down, if Virginia Tech does win out, but what if Justin Fuente doesn't want to be here anymore?
Could that be the situation where Virginia Tech goes 1-3 their last 4, Fuente's fired, they go 3-1, maybe he says, you know what, I'm done with Blacksburg, I'm going to go get another job at TCU, for example.
Well, the other thing is if he does well enough, he may get hired away. Is that very likely?
I don't know.
So it gets back to Andy Staples wrote an article in The Athletic that ran, I think, last Thursday, where he's a national writer and he laid out a pretty good understanding of the Virginia Tech situation, how the program has been underfunded in terms of assistant coaching salary pools, $3.6 million versus something like $5.5 million at UNC. The facilities have started to lag behind. So if a writer knows this stuff, and I'm sure he talked to Andy Bitter, to get material, and Andy knows this stuff. If a writer knows this stuff, then the industry knows it. And if there is, you go back to the Baylor situation. Baylor wanted to hire him, I think. It was never officially made an offer, but I think Baylor wanted to hire him a couple of years ago. the industry knows when there's a coach who, if he gets into a different situation and is supported in a different way, could be a better coach. I think if Fuente winds up leaving here after this year, I do think one day he'll be a head coach, and I do think he'll be a better coach at his next stop. I would be surprised if he was never a head coach again, and if he was a head coach and did worse. I don't think that's going to happen. So even though it's not super likely that he does well and gets hired away, it could happen.
Yeah, I think he'll find him. I mean, he, like you said, he will 100% find himself in the head chair again someday. And I had this conversation the other day with one of my friends, and I think I said one of the toughest parts and one of the places where I think Fuente went wrong, and I think he will learn his lesson in the future, is hiring the right people to fill in the holes. Yeah. We've talked so much about how Fuente's worked with the offense so much over the past couple of weeks. Why wasn't that happening before? And if so, why were the people that he was employing, why isn't he employing better people to do that so he doesn't have to spend as much time on that? And I think it goes back to, just hiring the right people. And I think being the head coach at Virginia Tech for 6 years or however long he's here will make him a better person and a better coach at the end of the day, because he will have learned so many lessons from being here. This is a guy who had never been a head coach at the Power 5 level before. He was a head coach at Memphis. That's a Group of 5 school, and nothing against Memphis, but it's completely different trying to recruit to Virginia Tech, and completely different with the facilities and the culture here at Virginia Tech. And, whatever happens at the end, I think he will have learned a lot of things come the end of the season over his 6 years that will change his perspective on how he is a coach going forward.
Good answer to our first YouTube question. Do we have anything else in the chat, Nate?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on just some, in-game nitpicks here and there. What can the defense do to reduce big plays? They got a lot better penetration, like you said, a lot many there in backfield left and right this game. But what can they do more to limit those big plays? Because even though I was listening to the game on the radio, I was coming back from deer hunting on opening weekend, and it felt like every big play, Laser was like, well, they got in the backfield, but Gibbs down or right up the gut goes for 20 yards. So what can they do to limit those big plays?
I feel like a lot of that goes – I don't know, blame players because I hate doing that. But I feel like a lot of that falls on the shoulders of the linebackers a little bit.
Yep.
The linebackers just aren't in the right positions. Dax Hollifield, Alan Tisdale, they're just out of position. I mean, I think Jahmyr Gibbs had that 61-yard run, and
now, I don't remember that play. What happened on that play?
He kind of just burst up the middle. I think
he broke a tackle like 2 yards past the line of scrimmage and then just sprinted.
Which is either a linebacker or a safety.
Yeah. So I think it falls on the back end, because I think Virginia Tech is solid defensively up front. The front four and the guys, the 4 defensive tackles that they rotate through. I think those guys are solid, and the corners are pretty good. But if the safeties and the linebackers have bad games, that's the entire middle of the field that you're giving up.
Yeah. And I don't know that this is unique to Virginia Tech, and I don't want to pick on him, but if you look at the 4th down touchdown pass, that's against Chamari Connor.
Yeah.
We've talked before about nickel's such a difficult position to play, because you got to be able to defend the run and tackle well, and you have to cover often slot receivers. And his coverage really wasn't that bad. That's another thing I can think of that I don't know that many teams can solve that problem very well, but my biggest answer to the question would be tackle better. Gap integrity, and when you get a hold of the guy, tackling. That had to have been their biggest problem in this game.
Yeah, against Syracuse, I think it was the linebackers. Like Tisdale and Dax were almost never in the right spot, and then they missed the tackle if they were. And the safeties were stepping up. Tay Daly had a great game against Syracuse, but then it almost felt like the opposite against Georgia Tech. Yeah. Tisdale and Dax played decent, but then the safeties just couldn't come and clean up behind them.
Yeah, I think to answer the question, the biggest thing is to get the guys in the middle of the park to play well, because Virginia Tech's cornerbacks have been pretty good for the most part. And I believe Jermaine Waller played almost the entire game on Saturday. He did not play against Syracuse, and you talk about big plays, Dorian Strong, like that's not going to happen every time. As Dorian Strong grows bigger, stronger, he's as he matures, he's going to be able to defend that play better. But I think a lot of the big plays have come on the ground. You see Sean Tucker tear up Virginia Tech. I think a lot of it has to do with those guys in the middle of the park, the linebackers, the safeties, and like you said, some games linebackers play well, some games the safeties play well,
Just
but
doesn't
they're
seem
not
like
on
they
the
play
same.
well at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the offense with the running and the passing game. This was the first game where Virginia Tech actually moved the ball both ways, and it wasn't relying on one or the other.
Yeah.
All right, and then the last question: why are the freshman wide receivers not touching the field as much?
That is,
I don't know that one.
Yeah, that is interesting. And actually, somebody asked Fuente about Trey Turner today, and specifically targeting him, and is basically kind of along the lines of, is that what you guys planned on as an offense, to target him that much? And his answer was pretty much like, there's only like 3 guys.
We're throwing it to 3 guys.
We're throwing it to 3 guys. We're throwing it to Trey Turner, Tavion Robinson, and Caleb Smith. It would be 4 if James Mitchell was in there, because James Mitchell will get a ton of targets. But he was like, we're only throwing it to 3 guys. And I don't know if it's not wide receiver development. I know Payute has played a little bit and Lofton's played a little bit, but
Jones has been hurt, I believe.
Yeah,
so
I don't.
Jalen Jones,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, they were all hyped up prospects. I mean, Fuente
likes them.
Fuente sat here and hyped up Lofton and Jones at the beginning of the season. Like you said, Jones has been hurt, but I don't know. Maybe just not comfortable. Maybe it kind of is along the same lines of Malachi Thomas and blocking per se.
Well, the blanket answer is always because the coaches don't trust them.
Yep.
We don't know why.
Yeah.
Don't have any inside information on that.
Yeah.
I wrote an article last year covering football, and I believe I wrote that the only 3 players with a catch last year at probably 5 or 6 games into the season were Trey Turner, Tavion Robinson, Caleb Smith.
Yeah.
Or it may have been over 5 catches or something like that. And I thought this year would be the year that kind of changes that, and it's still just those 3: Trey Turner, Tavion Robinson, Caleb Smith.
What's interesting is at the beginning of the season, I think we had a lot of wide receiver depth. Or we thought Virginia Tech did.
Yeah.
We went down to Charlotte for ACC Media Day, and they were talking about Jalen Jones, Dwayne Lofton, Jaden Payute's finally back from injury.
Yeah.
And it's really those 3 guys. And I mean, credit to them. Like, Trey Turner had a fantastic game, ACC Receiver of the Week. Caleb Smith is blocking like crazy. And even Tavion Robinson had a solid performance. They're all really good receivers. I like, it goes back to coaches' trust. If the coaches don't trust the receivers, there's, I've not really sure why, but all I know is that they're rarely getting on the field.
And we've talked to Chris about that a lot with the development of wide receivers. I'm sure he'd have some thoughts on this as well.
He'd point to the coaching. To be blunt about it, he'd point to the coaching.
Well, we appreciate everyone for dropping a comment and question in the chat. Thank you, Nick, for going through those for us. I think that's going to about wrap it up on episode 204. I usually ask Chris, but David, what we got coming up on TechSideline.com?
I am finishing up my article after the podcast on I will have kind of just thoughts from today's press conference. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to focus more on Fuente today. Tomorrow, it'll be more about what the players said and a little bit of Boston College stuff. Wednesday, we've got part 3 of our men's basketball preview. Parts 1 and 2 went up last week. Virginia Tech men's basketball season preview. I previewed on Thursday teams A through M in the ACC. So Boston College through Miami, and then Friday, North Carolina through Wake Forest and through Z. Kind of just going through bullet points. Kind of just here the last what's happened in the series history, all that good stuff. So Wednesday I'm going to do a position by position preview, and Thursday Chris is going to have his column. Besides that, just a regular week preview on Wednesday.
Yeah, the fact that the game is Friday night will not change our preview material and when we run it.
Yeah, we will still have our Wednesday preview podcast as well. I believe tonight is the final football-only Tech Talk Live.
Wow.
So
basketball next week.
Yeah, 8 days away from basketball season. So I'm sure we'll figure out when we're going to talk basketball on the podcast in the next couple
Yeah,
of
we really need to do that.
I think, well, the first game of the season is Tuesday, so maybe Monday we can do a split Boston College recap and basketball preview.
I think that's a good idea.
And it's a men's and women's doubleheader, too.
It is. It's Davidson at 5 and Maine at 8 for men.
And I guess one other thing, women's basketball has open practice this Friday in the afternoon, and I was talking to some people in the athletic department, and we're going to get to talk to a lot of players and coaches. So So a lot of women's basketball content coming too. Chris Hirons will have a season preview probably sometime this week. So
about to get very busy.
And we've been requested to cover women's basketball closer. Yeah, we will. I guess, we kind of wanted to see if Kenny was going to get things fully turned around and get him to the NCAAs again. And it's been, how many years has he been the head coach?
This is entering his 6th season.
Yeah,
so.
it's taken 6 seasons, but he's got him headed in a good direction.
Yeah, they are top 25 team. They're ranked in the preseason
and a lot
AP
of it's
poll.
Not just how are they doing, it's us getting to a point as an organization.
Being able to do it.
We got a new managing editor that we didn't have, so it was just me and Chris, and it's like, we got enough to do. I don't want to start editing women's basketball articles, you know. So we're at a point as an organization where we can cover it.
Yeah. And definitely. So Chris Hirons will be covering not full time, but Chris will be at pretty much every single game, and I'll be at some of them. But I'm excited. Basketball season, crossover season's always a little interesting, especially for not just the podcast, but writing wise. But I'm excited. Basketball season's gonna be really fun.
Yep. Football coming down the stretch. Men's basketball, women's basketball, both starting in 8 days.
And
wrestling coming up. Jack Brizendine going to cover that, I believe.
Yeah.
For Tech Sideline.
Yep. We got to figure that out.
He'll have a season preview sometime
soon.
The next couple of weeks. Yeah. I need to talk to him, but it's lots of stuff happening.
So a ton of good stuff coming up on techsideline.com over the next couple of months. And we haven't plugged this in a while. Free for students right now.
Yes, correct. Subscriptions are free for students. And, of course, as we said, the monthly is free for the first month. And we're getting some bites on that. We're bringing some new people on board. So it's been good. And I'm waiting for my graphics guy over there to create some ads that we can run on social media. So we'll start pushing that harder here soon.
Well, with crossover season coming up, never been a better time to join the Tech Sideline family. If you are not subscribed, now's the perfect time to do it. Football, basketball, wrestling, anything you could possibly want.
Everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to wrap it up here on episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Want to thank everybody for tuning in, everybody on set. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of TechSideline.com, at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter. David Cunningham sitting in Chris Coleman's chair today, filled in admirably. You can find him at The Real D Cunna on Twitter, managing editor for Tech Sideline. In the fourth chair, Nick Brown. It's Nick33 Brown on Twitter.
Nick Brown 33.
Nick Brown 33. Katie's the one with the number in the middle.
Katie's 6 Adams.
She's not on set today, but if you want to follow her, great follow on Twitter as well. Behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart always does a great job. I'm Jake Lyman, your host, signing off. That'll do it for episode 204 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Have a great start to your week, Hokies fans. We'll see you on Wednesday.